Thank you for being here. I love this topic. It's going to cover a lot of things, and we're going to try to get to as much of it as we can tonight as possible. My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. Been around since 2011. Proudly working with a couple of wonderful supporters in this program. One of them is Bucks County Opioid Settlement Funds are helping to allow us to be here this evening. Also, our partners at Chester County Department of Drug and Alcohol. So thank you very much to both of them for making programs like this possible. We are a nonprofit organization and we rely on contributions. So anything you can do to support us, we're very grateful for. You can follow up on tonight's program by visiting our website, and I'll put these links in the chat for you when I'm finished speaking. This page is conversation.zone/identity. Again, I'll give you the link, but that's where you'll find some supportive information. You can visit our calendar to find upcoming programs. We have a lot more coming up this year, more that haven't even been posted on the calendar yet. I need to get a few more up there, some that I'm really excited about, so stay tuned. We also have, as I mentioned, we're recording this, and it will join the other 190 plus programs that we have recorded on our YouTube channel. So please check that out. Please subscribe so that you get notifications when we have something new posted. We also like to make sure that you know about some support groups and other services that we have. Parent partnership meetings, if you're familiar with Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, they're similar to those. We encourage those as well. Those are 12-step programs. Parent partnership is under our umbrella. It is not 12 steps, so that means we have crosstalk. I find that parents really like to have crosstalk, but we have 21 meetings every week. Half of them take place on Zoom and half take place in person. The calendar on that page that I just showed you has this all these buttons on it. You click on the purple buttons to find out the location of the in-person meeting. You click on the green buttons to find the Zoom link. Also, no need to register or anything like that. You can just show up as often as you like. We also have another service, which is our family recovery course. All this is totally free to attend, by the way. And so please check this out. This is a really great 3-part course, capped at 12 individuals, so it stays nice and intimate as a group. We have 2 instructors for each course, and it really helps family members who have a child of any age with a substance use disorder. So I encourage you to check that out. I can't wait for you to hear about Hope in just a little bit, but I'm going to first get to some foundational information I'm going to share with you about the search for identity. But I'm really grateful to Hope that they are with us tonight. Okay, so identity is something that is like we think about labels and how somebody identifies themselves and the different ways that young people identify themselves. But it starts in early childhood. It could be cultural. It could be kind of what your religious affiliation or your family's religious affiliation is, their heritage, their race, that sort of thing. But oftentimes young people are maybe not articulating this in so many words, but it's going on. And I think it went on in all of our minds when we were young, like, who am I? And where am I going? What am I doing with my life? Which group do I belong in? All of that sort of thing. So when we talk about labels, they can be a slippery slope. And I think it's interesting to look at this great little video that a friend of mine, Dr. Caroline Finkel, found for us. And I've been sharing it ever since when we do this program. So I'm going to play this video. I think it is just, yes, about 4 or 5 minutes long. So I'm going to play this video. And
describe your friends. What clique are you part of?
I don't know if they like to hear it, but they were definitely like the burnout stoner kids. But they're great people.
What cliques are you a part of?
What clique?
Yeah.
Are cliques a thing at your school?
Ooh, cliques? This is interesting question to ask.
Are cliques a thing at your school?
Not really.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, that's not what high school's like. It's not that separated, but it is.
Each high school kind of runs a certain way, and there are certain cliques.
What clique are you a part of?
Nerds, I guess. I don't know.
Kind of nerdy.
I'm part of the nerd clique.
What makes you a nerd?
Minecraft, anime.
I'm pretty nerdy. I do computer science.
Computer hardware.
I was in speech and debate.
There's a lot of the quiet, shy kids that the popular kids kind of poke fun of.
Are you like an honor roll kid?
Yeah.
Why do you say that with shame?
I don't know if you consider AP kids a clique.
We're not like the people who go out like
a lot. We're more into like studies and we work hard a lot and we help each other out and everything. But we do like to have fun.
What other cliques would you say are at your school?
There's a lot of athletes.
Typical cheerleaders, I guess.
The basketball boys.
I would hang out with a lot of people who are into sports.
What clique are you part of?
Athletes.
Sports.
I do tennis.
Baseball, track, and tennis.
I'm on swim team.
I'm part of like the wrestling and gaming group.
No. How many people are in this group?
Not a lot.
I feel like a lot of the athlete group thinks that they're better than they are just because they get their popularity off of sports. I wish I could say I was like super athletic. If there were a group of just like super attractive, like smart, intelligent people, that's where I would have been, so, you know.
What clique are you a part of?
I don't think I'm a part of one. I actually have not found a friend group yet, so I'm gonna wait till college.
What clique were you part of?
The stoners.
Stoners? You know, there is the druggies.
There were the stoners.
They would all go and they'd all hang out in this abandoned building. Lots of PDA, making out in the halls, probably a lot of drugs.
What clique are you part of?
Definitely in the band kid group.
Band kid.
Orchestra.
I was definitely like a theater kid.
Theater kids. Best clique.
I definitely gained a lot of confidence.
What are the stereotypes of that group?
Loud, annoying, obnoxious.
I like to think the theater kids were where I was at, but I'm a little biased.
Is there like a small weird group?
Oh, there's a weird kid group too. Every squad has a weird group.
They would crawl on the floor like animals.
What was your clique?
Being part of the weird kid group, I guess.
What's like the common thread?
We're all into like probably anime.
It's weird. Like if you can really sit down and watch a show in a different language, you should, I don't know, just not interesting.
What are the cliques at your high school?
There were the ping pong guys.
The horse girl club, all like sat in the corner and drew pictures of horses.
We had the horse girls at our school.
The tryhard Asian group.
Very artistic ones, which I'm part of.
I was on the school dance team.
I'm like the shy one. Emo.
Oh, there's so many.
What clique are you part of?
We go to boba a lot. I'd say we're the boba clique.
The punks. We're into K-pop.
They're into what they're into and I'm just gonna let them do it.
There's this girl that she would wear like cat ears and stuff.
It was cool.
What group are you?
Not the popular kids, but not the like...
Losers.
Yeah.
I was part of the group who had no friends.
Antisocial. I kind of just hang out with everyone.
Personally, I like to fit in with like everyone.
I don't really have one.
I kind of associate with everybody.
Let's just be honest. Were you popular? Yes or no?
I don't know.
You were popular, weren't you?
I don't know.
I feel like I'm well known. I'm friends with people that have a lot of friends, I'd say.
Popular kids.
Popular kids.
I don't like saying that because it makes me seem like I'm conceited.
Did you vibe with the quote unquote popular kids?
Oh, no. No offense.
Are they assholes?
Yeah, I hate them.
Give me their names.
Brittany, Stephanie, the popular people that were like cheerleaders, and it was pretty generic.
They wore like Lululemon, Air Force One.
There's this group of like blonde girls that would always hang around at lunch and just make fun of everyone.
Were they popular?
I mean, they said they were popular, but...
You don't like them, do you?
No.
That's okay, just say I hate them. People in the popular group, there's a stereotype that they're kind of assholes.
Yes.
Were you an asshole in high school?
I was definitely a lot more judgmental.
I try to be friends with everybody I can.
I didn't think anybody knew me until like I asked somebody, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I got like nominated for like homecoming court. And then somebody was like, cause you're popular and everybody knows you. And I was like, I don't think so. So I think that's when it hit me. I was kind of in like the nice but known clique. Like that's
what
it.
all the popular kids say.
So anyway, I think that's cute. And it's also kind of reminds me of the movie Mean Girls. I think there was subsequently a musical made of that too, but they talked a lot about who belongs and what clique and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of interesting that gets fed into, I think, in all generations, really. And this is sort of our way of thinking about labels that we might impose upon our child, or that they impose upon themselves, or that maybe the school district does. So like if they've been identified as a gifted student, perhaps that puts a little bit of pressure on somebody to, live up to that label, that actual category of student in a school. When I was a kid, my parents used to introduce me as shy. Like, this is Kim, she's shy. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm shy. And that was something that really stuck for a really long time. Turns out as an adult, I'm not remotely shy, but that was sort of the way I was identified when I was a young person. The class clown, now you've got to be the funny person, you've got to make everybody laugh. Smart, we'll talk about that SMART label in a little bit because that can get very complicated. Gorgeous, what happens to the person who's always told how beautiful they are when they're not feeling like they're very beautiful on a certain day? They don't want to have to try to be beautiful all the time and live up to that label, to that identity. I think that mental health challenges can be especially interesting when we talk about labels and identity. So often, I know that I can speak from personal experience with my daughter, who has a number of diagnoses in the mental health, under the mental health umbrella. And she, for a time, we had to kind of have a talk with her because she was very, very much kind of stuck with this label on herself and sort of wore it as this badge that she needed to tell people that she had this thing and why she behaves a certain way sometimes. And we started noticing that she really felt like that was who she was. And we're like, you're so much more than that. There's so much more to you than that. And so just to remind our kids, if they happen to have a mental health diagnosis, like that's just one piece of you. And it actually might be a really interesting part of you. So perhaps to not allow that to, or try to foster like that idea of having multi layers to ourselves. Like we're not just one thing. The same goes with all of these other things like culture and ethnicity and all that kind of stuff. It's just a piece of who we are. It's our full identity. So this is why I think it's so interesting that calling someone smart, it certainly doesn't seem like an insult or a bad thing to call someone, to say that someone is smart, but we need to think about the way that manifests itself in a young person. So there was a really interesting study that was done by Carol Dweck. She was at Columbia when she did this study. She's now at Stanford. But she did this really interesting thing, and then she took a much deeper dive later on to get into this. But she had two groups of students, and I believe they were all fifth graders. They all took the same exam. It was very kind of simple, straightforward exam, not too hard, not too easy. But she had them in two groups. And group A, she told when they completed the exam, well, you all did really well. You must be really smart. And then group B, she said, well, you all did really well. You must have worked really hard. And then she offered both groups an opportunity to take the test again to see if they could get a better score. Well, group A, that was already told they were smart, were like, this was an option. They didn't have to take it again. They said, nope, I'm good with my I'm smart label. I'm going to stick with that. I think there was a lot of pressure imposed upon them to stay smart, to be smart, to prove to us that you're smart. If you think I'm smart, I'm sticking with that. But by telling group B that they worked really hard, they must have worked really hard, they were being acknowledged for their effort. And so they were like, yes, give me that test again. I'm going to try to do even better the next time. So just a kind of an interesting way to look at that. Another area that we like to talk about when we think of identity is that perfectionist or high achiever. So kind of along the lines of that, you're so smart, you're in the gifted program, all that kind of stuff. We see that young people actually are, they sort of have this perfectionist mindset. They want to please people. They cannot be seen as a failure. Some of the traits that they might have are being very competitive, needing that approval. So once you've got that, like, okay, you need to feed that label. You need to make sure that you tell me how special I am, that I'm important. And we see this play out in interesting ways when, let's say, somebody is at the top of their class in high school, and then they go on to, maybe they get accepted into their reach school, and now they're feeling an extreme amount of pressure to keep up with what their label was going into that, but also they're now in a pool of lots of other high achievers, so they may not be on top of the heap anymore. So what does that do to their identity? So there are a lot of expectations that can come with that, that might feed into them feeling like a failure if they don't exceed or excel in the way that they did when they were in high school. Athletes actually are a population that can certainly be, you can see that being involved in athletics as a protective factor, like, okay, this is great. They have something to keep them busy in the extracurricular hours, those off school hours. So they've got friend group, they've got some motivation, hopefully. So there are definitely some protective factors. to that. But I think what we miss a lot of the time, that there actually are some risk factors that come along with being an athlete. Some of the traits that they might have are being risk takers, loving that thrill. Also, those peer norms have to do with, like, if the culture is, and I've absolutely heard this play out, that if the culture is that everybody on the, let's just say, lacrosse team, they like to drink, well, I guess I'm going to be drinking just to stay close to my friends on the lacrosse team, that sort of thing. And then also, again, it comes with those pressures of being the best, succeeding. I mean, we've all seen, I think, that parent on the sidelines who's living vicariously through their child's successes or not successes. And then that wanting to be better and better all the time, and the pressure that puts on them. And then there are injuries. And in particular, we want to look at concussion, because injuries have a couple of ways of playing out. One is they might have an injury that puts them on the bench, and now they can't play, compete, whatever that looks like any longer. And now they've kind of lost that natural high that they were getting from their sport that they were in. But also, if they are given any kind of medication for pain, that might be something that is habit forming, like an opioid. You want to be really careful about that, because now you've got that combination of, I don't have my natural high, I'm not able to perform, I'm not able to make everybody happy with my performance, and now I'm taking this substance that might be lighting me up in ways that are not really good for me. Not everybody's going to have that problem, but some might. Concussions, kind of just in of themselves, can increase someone's likelihood to have a substance use problem. They might be wanting just to try substances to feel differently, and it does put them at greater risk as well. We know that from research, we know that adolescents young people who are adolescents might be more susceptible to binge drinking, smoking, tobacco, vaping, drinking alcohol, or using any performance enhancing drugs, steroids, that sort of thing. In particular, the sports that are identified as being the greatest challenges for young people with regard to substance use are ice hockey, football, lacrosse, and wrestling. Now, this does not mean that everybody in those who's involved in those sports is going to have a problem. It just is an indication that there might be some risk involved. So let's talk about the LGBTQIA plus population. We've done this program before, and you're going to hear from someone who is a clinician, but also has some personal experience. But in the past, when we did this, we had a wonderful young woman with us who shared her personal story, and we appreciated her so much that we want to share a couple of comments that she had with this little video clip, and then another one coming up. This is just a couple of minutes long. So
I'm here to talk about a little bit of my experiences in high school and how identity really played a role in not only how I viewed myself, but how others viewed me, whether that was my friends, peers, teachers, even my own parents. So yeah, my struggles began when I was relatively a freshman, but really progressed as I was a sophomore. Not only did I struggle with my own sexuality, as I identify a part of the LGBT community, as Kate was talking about earlier, but I also struggled with the expectations that were put on me, not necessarily spoken expectations, but more so the expectations I put on myself to not only continue to be a star student, I'm very much so a perfectionist, but to maintain my grades. I also was involved with athletics all of my life, so I had to keep that up as well. I wanted to be seen as the perfect student, but also perfect kid to my parents. So a lot of that had to do with expectations and, again, identity. I, unfortunately, in high school, went through a lot in and out of treatment programs. I was diagnosed with multiple mental health disorders, but I am now grateful for that experience, as it's not only taught me that I am not defined by my labels at all, but also I'm not going to let other people define me by those labels, as I am my own person and I get to choose how I'd like others to view me regardless of their own opinions. I know personally it was very much so of a struggle with my parents, understanding specifically why I had some of these mental health disorders or why I wanted to identify a certain way. But I I think these learning resources that are available, and even just resources that Kim Porter is a part of, would have been more than beneficial for my parents to even just sit in on a conversation and to understand better of what their child was going through. Not saying that my parents weren't supportive, but I feel as though there's so many more resources out there to help parents that maybe their child's going through something similar that I went through. Lucky enough for me, I was very fortunate through the school district to have lovely supports that were in place and really helped me get through high school, but not only that, graduate high school eventually. And yeah, so it's basically an overview, but I feel as though there's a lot of wonderful resources out there that are in place for children that struggled like I did. And yeah, I think this is a wonderful conversation to be a part of. So thank you for having me once again.
Love that. And then one more thing from Kayla, who's this young woman. There was a question asked when she was on with us, and she was asked, should teens be cautioned about finding their identity at a young age? And how do you feel about labeling? And this was her response.
I would definitely say that we have to remember that we're still growing up. So it's natural to find our own identities, and it's natural for our identities to shift and change as we go through new things. I wouldn't necessarily advise someone to stick to a certain label or to label their own children as something, as though that can be pressure inducing and can create more anxiety and just perfectionism. But I would definitely have to say that you have to realize that your kid is going to grow up into who they want to be, and maybe not necessarily living your own life through your child, but continuing to be a support, a listener, understanding that identities can shift, and it's okay to have multiple identities as long as we're not taking the label and defining that person for one specific thing that maybe we disagree with or don't like as much. Again, I just think being more of a support, and it's totally okay to voice your own opinions on things as long as you can be respectful for your child and respectful towards what they are going for.
Well, so if we're talking about this population, let's just make sure that we all understand on the same page what we're talking about when we have our little bit of alphabet soup here, LGBTQ2IA+. So you can see that some of these terms refer to someone's sexual orientation, other terms refer to gender identity, or sexual orientations and gender identities. So both. Two-spirit, we don't hear too much about lately, but I'm trying to cover the full range. And just so we're really clear that we're talking about, when we talk about sexual orientation, that's describing the way a person feels toward someone's gender, both physically and emotionally, in someone in particular, or more than one gender, physically or emotionally. And then the gender identity describes a person's internal and individual experience of gender, so how they identify along that gender spectrum. By the way, this is certainly not insinuating that this is like a risk factor for that this is a mental health challenge of any kind. It's just a risk factor. So that means that we know through research that there are higher numbers of people who binge drink, who use cannabis, who engage in IV drug use or use cocaine than their peers who are not identifying in that LGBTQ2I+ population. And we actually do have a generation gap when we're talking about this. So when you look at the different age groups that we identify as like Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, and silent generation, there's a gap. You know, this is actually looking at like kids who are young right now, and their parents are probably around this Gen X age group. And so they're folks who say that they know somebody who prefers gender neutral pronouns are actually much greater when they're younger, which is not too surprising, I'm sure. But also looking at the responses when asked, you know, do you believe forms should include options other than man and woman? So there's a shift in that as well. So it's really important that we try to get on the same page when we're talking with our young people, so that we are speaking the same language, so to speak. This was interesting when adolescents were asked in this span of time, between 2015 and 2023, you can see how many more adolescents and teens identify as something other than heterosexual. So, and I love how has been explained to us that when we say that, well, looking back at this again, when people say like, well, what is this all of a sudden that everybody's deciding that they're LGBTQI plus? What is that about? Like, is this a trend? What's happening? Well, if we think about the fact that people who are left-handed, historically back in the past when it was not really was sort of frowned upon to be left-handed, everybody in the K through 12 communities were being pushed to be right-handed. And so they didn't have special desks or scissors or any of that kind of stuff. So they were kind of being forced to be right-handed. And then finally, when we started accommodating those populations of left-handed people with desks and scissors, and it turns out even power tools and things aren't made for left-handed people, so we still have a long way to go. But as soon as we started accommodating them, more and more people identified as being left-handed. And so I think this is a beautiful analogy that we can look at, the fact that perhaps we're finally getting to a place historically, hopefully, where we are willing to acknowledge this and validate people's the ways that they identify with regard to gender preferences and their sexuality. So social media, oh my goodness, when we talk about young people, we absolutely have to talk about social media. We know that most young people have some sort of device, even in schools now that are handing out their tablets, notebooks, that sort of thing. But certainly on smartphones, they're not really using them as phones. They're using them as access to social media and kind of virtual friend groups and that sort of thing. Looking at the preferred platforms that they're using, this is just in a pretty short period of time. We don't even have more recent numbers. I would love to see comparison more recently. But looking at YouTube wasn't even on the list back 10 years ago, but you can see how popular that's become. TikTok, we know, Instagram, Facebook has taken a big dive. That tends to be a much older population now that's on Facebook. So it's really interesting how it's changed. I love this. This is taking a look at a survey asking our teens in the United States, what do they want to do when they're older? And really interesting, if you can see some of these, we still have doctors and nurses and athletes and musicians, but we have vloggers, YouTubers, and professional streamers as one of the most, if you're looking at all genders here. But it's just an interesting thing to see this change over the years. We've been looking at these kinds of studies for some time, and it does consistently shift. And just you can see in there, when you look at the male, female, we have male in blue dots, female in the green dot. We don't have non-binary folks here, but we do see quite a range in that gender. So we can look at those and break them down, but just really interesting to see that. So as parents, educators, guardians, coaches, anyone mentoring a young person, some really helpful tips I think would be like, let's kind of think about the language that we use. So if we're a parent and our child comes down early in the morning on their way to school and we see what they're wearing and we're not crazy about it, oh, what is that what you're wearing to school? That kind of thing. We want to really kind of try to tell that back, because when we dress down our kids like this, we're sort of shaming them, right? So like they're only young ones. We were only young ones. Did we like it when our parents dismissed our choices? No, we didn't, or maybe even really were opposed to them. We probably, at least I did, kind of doubled down on it and just kept going and just sort of maybe drove a wedge between me and my family. But certainly talking about the language that's used and that kind of thing, like, let's talk about it. I'm curious, can you tell me more about why you're using that kind of language or that terminology? Like, help me to understand that. I think that's interesting. And also just a note here about speaking negatively about friends. If we decide that we don't like our child hanging out with a certain person and we start talking negatively about that person, we could potentially drive a wedge again between us and our child and drive them further into that relationship. So we really want to be careful about alienating any friend groups that they're feeling very connected to, unless of course we think they're in some kind of harm. harm's way or and it's a dangerous situation. But if it's just something that we just don't like this person, our child likes them, and that's really all that matters. And we can do a lot of things that we're not feeling really good about. And so we can forgive ourselves and forgive the mistakes that we might have made, but remember some of the lessons we've made along the lines when we feel like maybe I was labeling my child, pushing against the identity that they're expressing. So we can, going forward, try to be a lot more open about those kinds of things. And I think this really applies to a lot of us parents. We have expectations when we have a child where we might see them playing with Legos when they're a little kid and say, oh, they're going to be an engineer. Look how good they are with math and science. You're going to be an engineer. I know it. Or if everybody in the family is in the plumbing industry, like you're going to absolutely be a plumber. That's just the way we've always done it in this family. We need to have a little bit of grace and understand that our child might not go along with what we have in our minds, what they're going to do with their lives once they become adults. If we're having a hard time understanding our child's, the way they're identifying, I really couldn't recommend strongly enough seeking professional help for ourselves. It helps so much to talk with someone. And also if our young person is struggling with their own identity, please, please, please consider, if at all possible, offering them some kind of support, whether it's seeing a professional therapist or at least talking with the school counseling staff to find out if there are any supports there that might be helpful to them. If your kids are in a public school, there is a student assistance program attached to your school. They have a lot of really great resources as well. So I'm really excited for you to meet our guest presenter tonight, Hope McMahan. Hope, I'm going to stop sharing and let you introduce yourself instead of me trying to say all the wonderful things there are about you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Also, just for having me on, I'm very excited to talk tonight. So while you were doing that presentation, I just will admit I feel kind of called out for some of the stuff, which y'all will learn as I share my story. So my name is Hope McMahan. I do use they, she pronouns. I'm a social worker here in Philadelphia. I am the Senior Prevention Specialist at Prevention Education. I travel the entire world working from 5th grade to college-age students, and I give the drug talk to young people. I actually never imagined myself working with teenagers because being a teenager was really rough for me, but I absolutely love it. And my entire professional and academic pursuits are all about how do we have a more effective way of talking to young people about substance use and substance use disorders. And it really kind of comes from, I was told simply don't do drugs, and that didn't really work out for me. So I'm a person in long-term healthy recovery, but we actually start my story. Usually this is more impactful when we're in person. I'm about 6'2", and I usually say that my story starts when I was really small. I grew up outside of Asheville, North Carolina in Appalachia. Most recently, you may have heard of Asheville with the hurricanes and the wildfires that are going on there. I grew up there in the early 90s. And when I was about 5 years old, I was diagnosed with autism. North Carolina is a beautiful state, but it is not very well known for its public education. When I was diagnosed with autism, I was also put into this program to help with standardized test scores because the western part of North Carolina is still historically the poorest part, and they were trying to raise test scores up. So they gathered a bunch of kids with a lot of potential to take all the tests and bring money into this part. From 1st grade all the way until I graduated high school, I stayed with the same group of about 25 students my entire public school career. When I was about 5th grade to 6th grade, I began taking classes at the high school level. When I went into high school, I started taking community college classes and actually finished high school before I was even done with high school. But some other things happened before we get to the finish of my high school career, which is when I was in middle school, I had a huge growth spurt. from I was about 5'5" in sixth grade, and by the time I was a ninth grader, I was over 6 foot tall. I had an older brother and older sister. They were both athletes. I also started playing basketball because when you're a 6 foot tall person, you just end up, you're a little bit better at sports, apparently, is what I learned. So I started playing basketball as well. I also, in the turmoil of middle and high school, I also came out as queer. And in my small Appalachian town, I was the only person I knew. Everyone looked the exact same where I grew up. We all went to the same church. Everyone pretty much worked for the same like company. Not a lot of people looked different from the rest of us. So when I came out at 13, I had a lot of issues. I was bullied, but luckily, some of my protective factors is I had a wonderful family who really supported me through all of that. And also, I had this kind of built-in idea that I was going to be the first person in my family to leave Appalachia. I am a first-generation college student. So I was able and have this thought process that one day I am going to be able to leave this small town and find the people that I was going to be able to fit in with. As I started my high school career, as this like 6 foot tall, kind of odd looking person for my community, I was in AP classes. I started on the varsity basketball team, the varsity softball team, and also was running cross country at the time. My freshman year of high school, I tore my ACL, my meniscus, and other things in my right knee. And this didn't deter me. I knew that I was either going to be able to get out of this small place from either my academics or my athletics. So I went through physical therapy. I had a few surgeries. I was able to recover. And by my sophomore year, I was playing basketball again. I stopped playing softball and I stopped running cross country because I was beginning to get looked at and recruited by a few like basketball, like colleges, some D1 schools who were going to be able to like pay for my like entire education. So I focused in, I started playing travel ball, still taking all AP classes. In 10th grade, I was technically done with the high school career. But for me to continue playing basketball, I kept taking more classes and ended up also helping teach classes at my school, where it was like this program where we could peer tutor each other. And throughout this entire time, I always would have an adult continuously tell me I had so much potential. And I remember thinking to myself, what does that mean? Like, I don't know where to stop. I kind of constantly joke today that I have no chill as a human being. And what I really feel like that means is I don't know what that potential ever meant. From my like early teen years when an adult told me that, I don't know what that means. Like, how do I know I'm going to get there? So as I get to my senior year of high school, I graduate in the top of my class. I had a 4.99 GPA, was a weighted GPA. I had been recruited by a few D1 schools, including the University of North Carolina. I had gotten into numerous Ivy League schools. I got into MIT, Duke, Brown, but I ended up not going to any of those simply because when I was visiting those schools, I was looking at their engineering programs. And this was back in the 2010 time period. So looking at the engineering programs at that time period, when I went, I shadowed some classes. I realized that every single person in those programs looked the exact same. I couldn't find myself in anyone around there. I was very fortunate that I had a guidance counselor that actually showed me a different school. I ended up visiting Bryn Mawr College here right outside of Philadelphia, which is a historically women's college. I visited there and I fell in love. I saw people who just looked different and they were getting along, and this was like a very new thing for me. I interviewed, I like got in, and they also offered me $60,000 in scholarship money, which at the time was more than my parents' like annual income combined. So I took the opportunity, and my parents drove us 12 hours up here and moved me into my first year of college. Usually, when I'm telling the story to high schoolers, I'm like, I promise I'm going to get to the drugs at some point. Like, I am in recovery. So at some point, I do use drugs, but we're just not there yet. I'm a little dramatic. So I move into my first year of college, and I have this roommate. She's an athlete. We get along great. I walk onto the basketball team because it's a D3 team and you don't really try out. And I'm not sure if anyone knows anything about Bryn Mawr College. They are known for a lot of things, but they're not known for their basketball team. They, at the time, had not won a game in about 4 years. So I walk onto the team and they were very excited. I was by far the tallest person. I made the team. I also made the captain of the team. And through the first semester of my first time at college, I had made the dean's list. I was captain of a basketball team. I was killing it in my classes. I was making some friends through like athletics. I was living up to this potential that like I didn't know what I was doing. But clearly like I had like documentation that I was doing something right. We get further into the basketball season around winter break, and we get into this tournament where, first off, we win our first basketball game in like 4 years. So this is like an amazing accomplishment. I'm like really, again, living up to that potential. We get into this tournament, we make it all the way to the finals, and we lose by a few points in the finals. It's a big deal. I'm still really proud of us because, again, like this is like we are turning this whole program around. And after the game, I get announced that I got the MVP of this tournament, which is a huge deal. I get to fly home on a plane the next day, which also my first time ever flying. I get to pack this trophy into my suitcase, and it's these like two bodies like embracing for a rebound. I get off the plane. My parents are there. They're picking me up. I unpack the trophy, and during the flight, this is just a sidebar that I always like to share. The heads actually get cut off from this because like I just didn't know how to pack stuff in a plane. Like I just thought you could just pack anything. So there are these there's now this trophy in my like family's house of these two decapitated figures embracing for a ball that I feel like is just like I just keep it now because it's hilarious. But again, this was just that proof that I was living up to my potential. I'm at home. I celebrate the holidays with my family. I go back up to Philly for the rest of our like season. We start our like training a little bit early before the semester. Our first game back, I am playing and I start to like kind of feel some sweat happening on my knee. I'm wearing a big knee brace and I have a sleeve. And I look down and I notice that there's some blood on my leg. I'm like, okay, whatever, like suck it up. I got to finish this game. We're really close to like winning this game. I end up falling after jumping and I look down and there's like just more blood and like my socks are soaked. I realized that the screws in my knee had actually come out. I had re-torn my ACL again. I am flown back home before the semester begins because there's about another week. I end up luckily being able to have a surgery scheduled. I have at this point 5 surgeries on my right leg and 2 surgeries on my left leg because they're taking stuff out of my left leg to put into my right leg. After all of this is said and done, I'm about a week late coming back to the semester, but that's fine. Bryn Mawr has allowed this to happen because it's a medical emergency. I am told by my surgeon that I'm never going to be able to play basketball again. At the time, this didn't really like resonate with me. But reflecting back on it now, I realized that I didn't know how to really handle this news. I also didn't know at the time that basketball was how I made friends. That little Hope never was given the like resources and the systems. When I talk about like North Carolina not having a great public school system, one of the failures that I had there with being diagnosed with autism was I was a very high achieving student. I was great at school. I wasn't so great at the social piece. I never fully learned how to make genuine connections with people unless I was like, kind of giving them something. And basketball was a huge way that I was able to make friends and be of use. And being told that I could not play anymore, I just lost a huge part of my identity, but also a huge part of how I could like show like how I could live up to my potential. So I moved back into college. This is also during Snowmageddon. I don't know if y'all remember this. This is when we got so much snow. I am on crutches. I'm in this huge brace, and navigating Bryn Mawr's campus was treacherous. And I'm kind of just struggling because I also am not used to the snow. I'm still going to practices and like working out with them. I'm doing my physical therapy, and I agreed to help coach the team for the rest of like my time at Bryn Mawr. Like I'm not going to be able to play, but I still want to be connected to the team somehow. We get through my entire freshman year, and I make the dean's list again, living up to my potential. Now I'm helping coach the basketball team. I decide to stay over the summer to work just to like get some money for books and other things that I may need. So I'm working at the gym, and I get approached by the crew coach. And again, I did not realize that being tall was going to like be beneficial in my life, but it turns out that being really tall is also great for rowing a boat. So I discuss it with my like doctors and everything, and they tell me that I'm actually going to be like rowing would be a great like alternative thing to basketball for me. So I joined the crew team. I get into my sophomore year of college, and I am now on the crew team, helping coach the basketball team. I get approved to be able to take 5 courses instead of 4 courses. I'm accepted into a 4+1 program through the University of Pennsylvania, where I'll be getting my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in 5 years instead of 6 in architecture. So I'm now, this is again, I have no chill as a human being, and I'm living up to that potential. I am on 2 sports teams. I'm taking multiple classes, and now I'm traveling into the city about twice a week to take classes at the University of Pennsylvania. We get through my sophomore year. My birthday is in December. I turn 19 years old right before we go into winter break. I make the dean's list again. I'm really rocking it. I'm like really loving this like architectural program that I'm in, and like this is like what I want to do with my life. I come back, and the basketball team isn't doing great. I just feel like no one's really trying hard. They're not winning. I'm just not in it anymore. And I'm just kind of getting really frustrated with them. I also am just not connecting with them anymore. So I move back in. It's January, it's cold, and I realize that I have been at this school for over 8 months now, and I have not actually made a genuine connection. I don't have any friends. And I realized, all right, how do you make friends in school? And I kid you not, I'm pretty sure this is just who I am. I'm pretty sure I Googled how do people make friends in college? And what I end up finding is probably what a lot of people still like. Y'all probably saw it. I know when I talk to like middle or high schoolers, this is what they see is that inside of like social media, TV shows, and movies is that there is no separation between a college or high school party and substance use. So I go to my first college party at 19 years old, and I take a red Solo cup and I have my first beer. And nothing bad happened. Actually, the exact opposite happened. I had so much fun. I got a huge dopamine hit. I know that my crush was at that party, and I was able to like go talk to my crush. I wake up the next day, I go to the library and I study, and nothing bad actually happened. I grew up being told that something bad would happen and just don't do drugs, but I never was told the why. So my perception of risk completely changed that night around this. And I was like, oh, wait, this is a way for me to make connections with people. So I start hanging out with more people that I had met that night, and I began to like casually go out. We get through my entire sophomore year. I am still in the 4+1 program. I'm still on the crew team. I'm still helping coach the basketball team. We get to my junior year, and this is where I start to also feel like things really shift for me and my identity. One, I'm starting to really understand who I am more. I've been able to explore who I am. I feel really safe on who I am. I'm also really like sure what I'm going to be doing after college. Like all of the things, everything is lining up. We get into the basketball season, and right before the season starts, because I've gotten so frustrated with them and I'm not really feeling like I connect with them anymore, I decide I'm not going to participate anymore. So I just kind of like cancel that out. This opens up a lot of time. We would typically have practices at night. So I end up starting to go out more often. In my junior year, I also was able to, through people that I knew and also just kind of learning how to do things, I also learned how to get into bars underage. And I began going to a bar. Again, if you're familiar with the Bryn Mawr area, there was, it doesn't exist anymore, but there was this bar that Villanova and Bryn Mawr shared. And on Thursday nights, there was trivia. And I love trivia. It's always been a lot of fun for me. And I also learned that I could get like Villanova frat boys to buy me free drinks. So Thursday nights were like a time that I would go out. Now, on Friday mornings, I had an early morning class at the University of Pennsylvania, and I stopped going to that class. And when you stop going to classes in college, you end up getting kicked out. So in my fall semester of my junior year, I am no longer part of the basketball team. I get kicked out of the 4+1 program, and I just kind of shrug it off. I'm like, whatever, I am still like doing great in school. I will just go end up getting my master's later on in architecture. Everything is going fine. In my junior year, my fall semester is the first time I got hospitalized for an alcohol overdose. Nothing really came of that. I just shrugged it off because I just thought I was a normal college kid. I'm also now starting to, I've been using weed pretty heavily at this point because I was told that like being like artsy as like an architect, it was going to like help loosen me up and like help me be more creative. It was also something that like I noticed that a lot of other like queer people were doing at the time as well. We get into my spring semester of junior year, and this particular January, I remember being very cold. At this point in my use of like substances, I'm going out on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. Even at a D3 school, there are rules around you're not supposed to drink or use before practices or when you're in season. I was not following those rules. And on Monday mornings, every single Monday morning, we would have practice in January. And at 4:30 a.m., a little van would come pick us up, take us over to the Schuylkill River. We would have to kick the ice off the edges of the river, put the boat in, and go off for practice. This one Monday, I remember very vividly, I had been out at this bar that I played trivia at. I get home at around 2:30, wake up at 4:30. I'm still intoxicated, but I'm going to go to practice because this is a commitment that I have to keep doing. We get to the Schuylkill, we kick out the ice, we put the boat in, I get onto the boat, and I immediately vomit off the side of the boat. Now, rationally thinking now, I would have stopped going out on Sunday night. However, during that time, I also think a lot about like my brain science now that I'm older of I was still getting that dopamine hit. I had created an unhealthy pathway between my pain and pleasure part of my brain, and I hadn't yet formed that prefrontal cortex yet where I can understand the risk and reward. So I quit the crew team. So no basketball, no crew team, no more 4+1. I've also now been put onto academic probation because of the classes that I've been missing in the mornings, which means that $60,000 scholarship that I had, something was going to be happening with it. And I didn't really fully understand that at the time. Again, as a first generation student, there was a lot of things about college that I just did not understand. And nor did the school really know, like at the time, how to help young people like navigate. So we get into my senior year. I am able to use a lot of my AP credits to stay on track to graduate like in the 4 years that it should take. I am writing an undergraduate thesis. I am still lined up to be able to take a master's program after my classes. By the time fall break comes around, I am hospitalized 10 times for alcohol overdose. When winter break comes around, I receive a letter from the school saying that I am no longer welcome back. I am kicked out of college with 1 semester to go. My parents drive 12 hours, they pick me up, and we drive 12 hours home in silence. My parents did not know how to talk to me about this at all. I had never learned about family history of addiction. They didn't really know how to talk to me as any type of they don't know how to talk to me about the autism or about being a person who is queer, or even what my experience was like being so far away from home. So I moved back in with my parents. I ended up getting a job at a local soap making company in Asheville, and things are starting to work out. I'm able to start kind of rebuilding, and I'm just at this point really angry at everyone. May of 2016 rolls around, and this is when I was supposed to be the first person in my family to graduate. And on Facebook, I began seeing all of my friends post all of these photos about them graduating. And I have so much guilt and I have so much shame happening. By the time that August 2016 comes around, I go from holding the record for the most amount of rebounds and blocks in a season for high school basketball to the most amount of DUIs you can get in 1 week. I received 2 DUIs over the double the legal limit in North Carolina within 10 days. I am sentenced to 2 years in jail. I am very fortunate I was able to go through a drug treatment court where instead of 2 years served, I was then sentenced to 6 months, which was reduced down to 3 months because of overcrowding. Once I was released from jail, I got 2 new accessories. On my right leg, I was given an alcohol monitoring bracelet that I wore for 9 months that was continually monitoring if there's alcohol in my system. And on my left leg was a GPS monitor telling me to be home between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. I was 23 years old while this was happening. And I always will pause and just say that I don't share this part of my story ever to scare anyone. That if you have a young person in your life that has any of the shared identities that I have, that's not going to that's not them destined to happen. I share this because my drug education was not what I do, not what Kim talks about. I really do this because I don't want anyone to ever have to experience what I've gone through. There's also the fact that of how rare it is to be in long-term healthy recovery. I know for those of us who go through drug treatment courts in the United States, to get into long-term recovery over 5 years and not re-enter into the judicial system is less than about 2% of people. After 4 years in recovery, I did end up completing the drug treatment court. I returned to Bryn Mawr College to get my bachelor's degree and then to go on to my master's degree. And now I'm working towards a PhD, be able to keep doing this work. And again, it's all about sharing my own experiences and the things that I didn't do well to help those coming up. And also talking about the intersection between all of this stuff of talking to young people about what the pressure of you have so much potential can put onto a young person and how can we reframe that from them. That is all I have to share. And I just really appreciate y'all being here. I will say that this has been, I feel more of an emotional time period for me to talk about my own story, just with recent things that are happening. But I do really just appreciate Kim inviting me on here to be able to talk tonight.
Wow, Hope, what a story you have. I mean, I knew a lot of that, but I was riveted by so many of the details. And I would love to know from our other participants if they have any questions for you. I have a few myself, but I would love to hear from our other participants tonight. So you can either unmute, you can put something in the chat. You can raise your hand using the little raised hand thing. But I'm going to start off that but please, please, please feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat or unmute. But I'll just ask you, if you're comfortable sharing about your identity as a queer person and how that played into, I was like, really was paying attention when you said that drive home after the big fall from grace kind of thing, right? That the silence in the car. How much of what was going on with that silence, was it substance use? Were they already aware that you identified as queer? Like kind of whatever you feel comfortable sharing about all of that I think would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I did like officially come out to my family when I was about 13 years old. They also, so they were very supportive of it, even though that they never really understood. Like it has been a very long journey with my family. I love them so much because even in the beginnings, it was like they were like, I don't understand this, but I love you. And I'm just going to support you with whatever you want. On the flip side of that is when I got into Bryn Mawr, it was a very big deal, just because like not only did I was the first person to go to college, but I ended up going to like a big deal kind of college. And so I felt more about like me failing them, and they didn't really know how. Like this was the first time I failed also. Like I was the perfect student on paper. I was the perfect like athlete. I'd never gotten in trouble. Like they didn't know about the hospitalizations. They didn't know about all of this stuff. All of a sudden it just like everything hits the wall. And so like I don't really blame them for being silent. Like how would you respond to that? This is the first time your kid fails. And it's also they didn't know how to talk to me about my substance use. They also thought it was like somewhat normal. Yeah.
Did you later find out that there was a family history?
Yes. So I actually later found out that my dad actually was in active addiction throughout parts of my adolescence, including that time period. Mm-hmm. He is now in recovery, but I feel like it was something that we didn't talk about. And like, I was very oblivious that it was even happening. There's also like history on both sides, and it was always just kind of, we don't talk about it. We also didn't talk about going to therapy. It was like, something's wrong with you if you talk to a person. It was very hush hush. It also brought shame to the family, which that built into my own shame around my own addiction.
How do they feel now that you're working in this field and you're sharing so publicly? But I'm asking you to share even more about how does that sit with everyone?
Relationship with my family now. I call them, if I don't call my mom.
Hope, you're kind of breaking up a little bit. Your audio was breaking up a bit.
Can you hear me?
It's choppy for some reason. That's
all right.
Yeah, it's really choppy. I'm wondering if your earbuds the battery might be going.
Okay, how's that?
It's better.
Okay. What was the question one more time? Sorry.
How do they feel about you being in the field now and talking so openly about everything?
Yeah, they're kind of surprised, but they also are not. My family really has taken this idea of like me living up to my full potential as like, this is what I was supposed to always do. Like even including my own name, like Hope comes out of like I was like one of those miracle 90 babies, where like I wasn't really supposed to be here, but you know, I ended up here kind of situation. So they've always like, they were like, you're here for a purpose. And so now they've turned it into like, you take your experiences and like you are helping like make the world, like you're bringing hope to the world. So that's kind of how they see it. And I've had to like talk to them sometimes about like, this is still putting some pressure on me. But I also they really like turned around, and now we do openly talk about like our family history of like addiction and things like that.
And how much you were going to study engineering and man, you got into some incredibly impressive schools and all of that. Did you feel your own sense of like dashed expectations that it was supposed to go this way and then you went that way? Like, how did that all feel for you?
It's a weird journey. I feel like what I'm doing now is the correct way. As a young person, I don't think my younger self would have ever imagined me doing any of this, because so much is tied to like my personal experience with like being a person with a substance use disorder. I did dabble in architecture in my sobriety. I actually worked for an architectural firm, but I got burnout and I ended up experiencing a lot of really bad mental health like things from it because it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I was honestly only doing it because it was seen as a successful career and it was seen as living up to my potential. Where what I'm doing now is like maybe not everyone would see it as something that's like living up to a potential because it's not a high achieving. Yeah, I know it's a whole thing, but we're still working through it. But to me, it is like I'm living up to a potential in a different way. Like, so I've like had some adjustments and I still have some like things that I work through with like my own like therapist about this. And I talk to my family about it. Like, I've really like helped them start to see like a difference of like going for a career that we actually are more passionate for versus simply like a financial like reason or other reasons or a status. Because that was like, again, like I since first generation student, um, my family has really only seen as like the point of going to college and getting degrees is to make more money. And that's not always necessarily true. A lot of people end up doing it because they just want to learn or they want to be able to like help the world in a different way.
Wow, yeah, and my goodness, what the lives you're impacting and all of that. I hope I don't have to say this to you, but I hope people understand how important what you're doing is, and I know that you're making a huge difference. And yeah, and unfortunately the finances don't always align with the actual value that a person brings to other people's lives. And I also think just when we're talking about identity, that it's so interesting to think about that college education. Our culture has this mentality of raising kids to be 18, like 18, you're an adult. So 18 is when you go off to college, right? Or that's the plan, at least, and that we think that's going to be the measure of success. And so the goal for our educational system is to like get them ready. So the testing and the where do they land and where are they going to go next and all that. And I think that the parents definitely buy into that a lot of the time too. Like, how do I get that resume looking good, and that 18 is like this finish line. And I really loved what I heard as a pediatrician say years ago, as a public speaker on childhood resiliency, and he said we should, instead of raising kids to be 18, we should raising kids to be 35 to 50-year-olds. Like, are you a good neighbor? Are you on time for things? Do you do any community service? Like, these are things that we don't really think about, but it's always like that. Like I said earlier, oh, they're good at this, so they're going to be that. And I've had such a shift in the way I think about college too, that first of all, college is not for everybody. And secondly, who can make a decision at frankly, like the age of 16, when you're looking to see where you want to go to school, if that's what you're going to do. You're supposed to decide what your career is going to be. I mean, that is such a tall order. And then to feel the burden of like, well, my family's helping me with this huge investment, and I said I was going to be a nurse and now I don't want to be a nurse, but I can't tell them that, you know what I mean? Like there's that feels like such a burden, I think, on a lot of young people. I feel like it's a rare person who knows at a tender age what they want to do, for the rest of their lives. You found your passion. And I found mine when I was 50 years old. I was a graphic designer, which I still love and I still do as part of my work, but I did not see myself working in this field. It was my son who brought me into this field, but I'm so grateful for a lot of things that he's doing so well and all that, but also that he introduced me to this area because, I'm never going to make $1 million running a nonprofit organization, but my cup is full, you know? And so I hope you feel the same way. I'm sure you do.
Oh yeah. Like I said at the beginning, I never thought I would end up working with teenagers because, like, yeah, I was like looking at being an engineer, an architect. I was even pre-med my like first year of college, and all of that meant more schooling and more stuff that I was like, this doesn't seem worth it. And I just really wanted to work with people at the end of the day. And I mean, like, even yeah, teenagers, they're amazing, but teaching them sometimes, especially having the drug talk with them, like that has like it brings me so much joy. Like the things, their curiosity, what they ask me, and also just being an adult like figure for them to be like, oh, you don't have to fit the norms. Like if you fit into a label, like you can actually you don't have to fit like that label. And I think that's my favorite thing is like because I don't think that I'm always like kind of like seen as, you know, I was a jock in high school, I was a nerd in high school. And that video really cracks me up that you shared because it talked about the person who wore the cat ears. And I always talk about like those were my best friends in high school because they allowed me to be who I was. And when I share that with young people, I feel like I can sometimes see them being like, oh, I don't actually have to fit into this certain label as like a high schooler, but they have so much pressure at that age to like they need to fit in.
Right. Right. Yeah. Awesome. I want to again invite anyone who has anything they would like to share to unmute if you'd like. We'll put something in the chat. We had a couple of advanced questions. One was about self-harm. I don't know if that's something that when we think about identity, my understanding is what I've learned from a few clinicians is that when there are clients together in an IOP, like an intensive outpatient program, something like that, or even inpatient, that there tends to be this kind of viral thing that happens sometimes with self-harm, where they figured out that get their hands on a stapler or something like that, and they'll just kind of do this thing to connect with one another. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about self-harm, your experience working with young people, what some risk factors might be, some ways to mitigate to address that kind of thing.
I took a moment to just like kind of think and take that in. I think, yeah, the phenomenon that happens around like self-harm, that is like something that we do see. I think the other part is there is some type of like I talk a lot about with like young people, like the pain and pleasure part of our brain. And when you're young, that is what's in charge of your brain. There's an amazing TED talk that I always steal this from is like, as adults, we have to be the prefrontal cortex for young people because they have like this Ferrari engine that runs on dopamine, but they have bicycle brakes. So we have to like kind of be their actual brakes. And when it comes to like going back to this pain and pleasure, well, if we can get an over like amount of dopamine, that means we can also experience that pain. So during that time period, like something with self-harm is also creating that unhealthy pathway that they're not understanding that risk that's going to happen with it. And it's throwing off their balance for that. And I think when it comes to like, yeah, if we're starting to see that phenomenon, like what are the signs? I myself have experience with this, like through my own personal stuff, but also through like friends that have also had a self-harm history, is that I see it really similar to like when I think about like addiction. A lot of stuff is really similar, like how it's hidden, how there's like so much stigma around it. And a lot of times it's just there's an underlying issue when it comes to like what is the actual root why this person's having to do this, and just really encouraging and having an openness to be able to talk to a professional about what is going on about it, because even if there is a phenomenon that's happening like in the school, again, there's a deeper root there.
I saw you doing this with pain and pleasure, so I think we may have discussed this before, but I think you might be an Anna Lemke fan as I am. Yeah. So For anybody who wants to geek out like Hope and me, please read Dopamine Nation if you're interested in learning more about dopamine. Anna Lemke is an addiction psychiatrist at Stanford University, and she brilliantly lays out how the brain responds to us living in this dopamine-rich environment, and really an overload of dopamine in our culture here in the US. But I have yet to hear her talk about self-harm. And I wish that she would, because when you look at, she talks about that seesaw, that when you have that get that dopamine buzz, that high, that feel good, that there's this counter thing that happens with the gremlins and all that kind of stuff, where you now feel this pain, and it's, I feel like that what she's explaining helps me a little bit to understand self-harm, and that pain is still something that's it's messing with my reward system. And that in and of itself is going to make me feel differently and take me out of my stuff, whatever that is that day. So I would, if I ever had a chance to ask her a question, I think that would be one of 100 that I would have for her. So.
Yeah. And I think on that too, when I talk to students about the seesaw, and I really make sure they understand that we experience both of those in the same place, because I also often hear, or just kind of view, that we're always told that if we're not having a good day, that something's wrong with us. And in actuality, we have to have not good days. Like, we need to experience the complex emotions, and that's okay. Like, there's not anything wrong with you if you're not always happy, that you're not always like motivated or anything like that. That we have to have this balance for both of them, because if we don't experience a little bit, we can't, like, it's just, yeah, it always is working on that teeter seesaw type of situation. And I feel like that was something that when I reflect back on my own, like, I didn't know that I could experience. I thought, like, I always had to be happy. I always had to be doing the best. I didn't realize I could have a bad day. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you said the word happy just now, because I had to learn this as a parent, because my daughter struggles to this day with depression and anxiety. And it was really at a fever pitch about 9 years ago. But one of the things that I learned from, it might have been one of her therapists or a family therapist or somebody that we were seeing at the time, where she was saying that word, we parents say this a lot: I just want my kids to be happy. And they're like, okay, that we can fill that order. We can put on that mask so that you don't see anything but happy, right? We can do our best to bury what's really going on with us. And I hope I never said those words exactly, but if I did, I know it was well intended. I know that we want joy in our children's lives and all that, as we do for our own lives. But I would love to think about it differently, and I completely reframe it now. And I wish this for both of my children, that they find a way to manage their unhappiness, because nobody's life is going to be pure joy 24/7. It's just not reality. Life happens, things happen that we have no control over. Things happen internally that we are trying to figure out, that we're trying to unpack from when we were children, from so many things in our lives. And to feel pressure to be happy all the time is just, it's just not fair. But boy, what a beautiful thing to wish for. That, like, I hope that when rough things happen, and they're going to happen, that you find a way to ask for help, to find balance, to center yourself, to be mindful, all those kinds of things, that we've got to pick up those tools for ourselves. And as parents, there's nothing worse as a parent than seeing your pain in child. And I have 2 children who've had, one with substance use, one with mental health. We talk a lot about co-occurring, and my daughter abstains completely from substances, thank goodness. And my son, other than some social anxiety and some other minor things when he was a teen, didn't really have those tremendous challenges, but they both take a toll on the whole family, because you just, as a parent, cannot stand seeing your child in pain, and you want to do anything you can to mitigate it, to advocate, I'm going to fix this for you, I'm going to take that pain away from you. We don't get to do that. That is theirs to navigate. I will do everything I can to put some opportunities in front of you for support, but to think that I'm going to take it away is not realistic. And so I hope that parents consider that with struggles that they see their kids going through, and being open to hearing. We also had a question about adoption. Hope and I talked about this a little bit, just being open to like, what pain are you in? What struggles are you having? Tell me how you are these days with this. Where did you feel, last week when you seemed to be having a rough time? Do you want to talk about it some more now that you seem to have a little bit more space from that? Just being open. It's hard. I love what one of our other therapist friends says, that we parents need to get comfortable seeing our kids be uncomfortable, so we can lean into all the challenges that come their way and roll with it and be there for them.
I was gonna add into a really common thing I get. When I'm working with schools, I end up working with parents and faculty too. And a common thing I always get from both faculty and parent meetings is like, what can we do? And my biggest piece of advice, because I only have a cat and a dog, so I'm not really worried about them. And so I'm never going to tell a parent how to parent, but just from my own like research and like experience is more of like, well, how do you model management of your emotions and stress? And also, what were you taught as a young person? They're being taught something very differently than what even like I was taught as like a younger millennial. And how we show them, like they're learning from us. Even if they're in that stage where they don't want to talk to you at all as a teenager, they're watching you and they're learning from you. And being open and uncomfortable yourself and talking about what you're processing is huge, because it's also showing them that they're allowed to talk to you about it so that they can learn. And that's just like, yeah, my biggest piece of advice is being like getting into that uncomfiness with them, because that is so important, even though it's not a fun conversation. I always joke with teenagers and parents of, go home and have an uncomfortable conversation, because it's really worth it, even though it's going to suck.
Yeah. And just for our children to know that we're willing to have that conversation. And you're reminding me too of something that we talk about when we do prevention programs about substance use with parents, is to say, please don't try to avoid any kind of disparaging language about somebody with a substance use problem. Same goes for somebody who was in the gifted program and isn't anymore, or somebody who was, performing well as an athlete or doing whatever, and now is not. But like, just to not say negative things about that person, because then our child might view us as having those really high, crazy expectations that you never quit, you never this, you never that, So we want to give them some grace to know that their parents aren't going to judge them as we're judging other people too. So they're not going to be very likely to come to us with, I really want to quit playing the saxophone, if we've made it really clear that we see that as a failure, or somebody else not being the right kind of kid. Well, I could sit and talk to Hope all night, but does anybody else have any questions or comments? I did share the links that I mentioned earlier in the chat.
I will make a huge recommendation for another book. It's called The Teenage Brain. It's written by a neuroscientist from the University of Pennsylvania who has a teenager, and she talks about what it's like and like what's going on in the brain, and like kind of just like really like real life examples of what it's like having a teenager, but also knowing so much about the brain at the same time. And gives some examples of like, my teenager wants to dye his hair green. Like, what's a way to I can respond to like, I want to make sure that I'm encouraging this like identity exploration, but also like I really don't want my son to have green hair. So I highly recommend that book, just because it is kind of, I feel like it helped me understand my own self as a teenager, but also like my like younger, like my niece who's like now a teenager. So
Yes, love it. Her name is Frances Jensen. That's the author. She is my ex-husband's boss.
Oh.
He's a neurologist there, and she's the chief of neurology at Penn. Yeah, she's amazing. I love it. Love it. Thanks for bringing that up. Great book. Yeah, I think her kids are all grown up now. That was a few years ago that she wrote that.
Yeah. Like I say, it's a little bit older, but yeah, I always recommend it to parents because I'm like, I feel like this really hits home.
Right, right. Oh, it's so cool that you mentioned that. Great. Well, if we don't have any other comments or questions, I want to thank you all for being here and Hope, cannot thank you enough. Really, your story is so powerful and the children that you work with are so fortunate and keep up the great work and good luck with the doctorate.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. And also thank you all for being here. It is a huge protective factor for all the young people in your lives to just being a part of the conversation, not to plug the whole thing, but
Go for it.
it's true. It's all about us kind of unlearning stuff that we've learned when we were younger, but also like how do we like help the next generation out?
Definitely. Thank you, Hope. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Night. Bye.